Hello everybody and welcome to another Doctor Who review. This time I'm reviewing a Peter Davison story. It is Black Orchid. As always, I have with me for the classic TV series reviews, The Television Companion. Here's the plotline for this story. The TARDIS arrives on Earth in 1925, where, due to a case of mistaken identity, the Doctor ends up playing in a local cricket match. The travellers then accept an invitation to a master fancy dress ball, but events take on a more sinister tone as a number of murders are perpetrated at the country home of their host, Lord Cranley. The Doctor comes under suspicion, but the murderer is eventually revealed to be Cranley's brother George, who has been kept locked up in the house ever since returning in a deranged and disfigured state from an expedition up the Amazon to find the legendary Black Orchid. George mistakes Nyssa for his former fiancée Anne Talbot, who looks identical, and takes her up on the roof of the house. He is persuaded by the Doctor to let her go, but then falls from the roof to his death. There we are, Black Orchid, the plotline. Do you know what? This is interesting because it's the last pure historical Doctor Who story. The only sci-fi element is the TARDIS itself. Everything else is based on the four characters being in a time period and living up to an adventure based on that time period's information. Pure historicals faded out in the early Patrick Troughton era, and this is the only attempt in the classic series since then to have a pure historical story in regards to Doctor Who being in that universe. And to date, this is the latest pure historical story in Doctor Who's canon of the TV series. So it's interesting having that kind of plot line and having that kind of story, especially in an era like the Fifth Doctor's when you've got so many characters. What makes this one interesting for me is the mix between the fish out of water that you have with Nyssa and Adric, Tegan understanding and loving the history factor, and the Doctor in the middle melding it all together. I'll go through the characters and then I'll go through some of the good bits of this story. We have, of course, the Doctor played by Peter Davison. This is now the Doctor, the kind, the kind of innocent and friendly big brother Doctor that we've now come to have of Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor. This is the Doctor I do enjoy watching because he's kind of got that kind of kind-hearted nature, ineffectual, quite soft-spoken, but there is that kind of frustration you have coming through at certain points because the Doctor's trying to clear himself of the suspected murder in the second episode, and that frustration and that kind of aged wisdom that the Doctor has is trying to come through and doesn't quite make it, and that frustration you get here is interesting. But he's affable all the way through. I love the way the Fifth Doctor works with the story. He's quite inquisitive and childlike at times for some of the things he does. His exasperation when he realises that things are getting the better of them is really interesting. That great little quote he does in the first episode, "Why do I always let my curiosity get the better of me?" Really nice. I really do like it. You can see he's settled in. It's not like the previous story, The Visitation, where you can still see there's elements where he's trying to find his way a little bit. This one, he knows his character, he knows what he wants to do, and I do love the way the story works for this. I think it really does work quite well, and it's really enjoyable. We then have Adric, played by Matthew Waterhouse. Ineffectual, not really much use. It's like Terence Dudley tried to play on the tropes of Adric. It's like he had a prompt card to say that this is Adric, this is his character, things. Adric doesn't do much. He's a little bit fish out of water, a bit confused at times. Adric does seem to be the spare part when it comes to the three companions. And Nyssa and Tegan seem to get a lot more to do in this one in regards to what they say. The focus is on Nyssa a bit more, which I'll come to in a minute. It's an interesting story in a way it's worked for that. But ultimately, it's a strange one. Matthew Waterhouse is okay. He doesn't bring much to it. He is like the spare part. He's like the Ryan of the Witchfinders. He doesn't have much to do, and he's there as kind of slight commentary and plays on a trope a little bit with his love for food. He doesn't do too much, and it's really, you can see why they were struggling at this point to have three companions at the TARDIS and why it didn't work that well and why one of them had to go, which happens next time round. Spoilers if you've not seen it, but yes, it's okay. It's all right. Then we got Tegan, played by Janet Fielding. Of course, Tegan has returned recently in The Power of the Doctor. This is probably the most relaxed Tegan that we see in this series. She's always a bit shouty and moany normally, but this one she's actually more relaxed. I think she's realised she's happy to stay. She's not as narky at the Doctor like she was in the last episode because she's accepted that she wants to stay and travel a bit more. And I think the whole story of visitation makes you realise that she was quite happy to do so. And I think she's really revelling the fact that she's in the 1920s, she's enjoying the whole atmosphere and the kind of upper class aristocracy that she's got herself into, and the whole conversation. And I think it really works. And I really do think it's really well played, really warm. She doesn't get many lines, she doesn't get much. She has a good rapport with Sir Robert, and that's about it. But ultimately, it's not a bad little role for Janet Fielding here, and not a bad little situation with Tegan. She's like the audience window to enjoy the whole experience. The interesting one is Nyssa. Sarah Sutton playing Nyssa, of course, and she also plays Anne Talbot. There is a slight subtlety between the two characters. I get the feeling that Sarah Sutton likes playing the upper class a little bit, but she gets to play a bit more the kind of simpering Perils of Pauline type a little bit, which it works okay. I do like it. It's not the greatest, it's not the worst, but it works for me in regards to the story and the way it's all created. I think it's quite an endearing role that's played by Anne. Nyssa, I love the fish out of water factor, where they're saying all these kind of words like topping and top hole and ripping, and she's trying to understand. Nyssa comes from an aristocratic background from Draken, and this whole double take between her and Anne and the whole conversation, you can tell that Nyssa's a bit more nervous, but actually enjoys the fact of having that kind of dual costume that Anne and Nyssa wear for the fancy dress party, and that whole mix-up is actually quite interesting. You're not quite sure who's who at times when it comes to the two together in that costume. Sarah Sutton does manage to have enough nuance so you know which one's Anne, which one's Nyssa, with the way they work about. The best bit, I think, is when she chides Adric for eating at the buffet table. Is that seconds, you pig, she says. I love that kind of nonchalant big sister coming out against Adric, which I think is really nice and really sweet, and I do like that little element there. And overall, Sarah Sutton doesn't really put her foot wrong this one. She has a lot more to do, and she shines. She does shine in this one. She is probably the best of the companions here of the three. We then got some of the guest cast. We've got Lady Cranley, played by Barbara Murray. She's all right. She's okay. It's a upper class mother of Lord. It's not quite played like you get in Downton. It's not that sort of role. She's more the traditional upper class, but it works. And the fact that she's seems to be of slightly sterner stuff than you think, because she's obviously helped to get George back from the Amazon with Latoni's help. And I think it's an interesting way of working, and it's an interesting character. But there's not, she's effectively a kind of upper class plot device. She doesn't do too much, but I do like the way it's played by Barbara Murray, and it does work for the role. You've then got Murray Watson playing Sir Robert Muir, the head constable of the area, who's a good friend of the Cranleys. For most of it, he's kind of he acts like a policeman basically, and then takes his role as chief inspector quite seriously when it comes to the murder stuff, and you do believe he has that authority when it comes through, and it's played okay. I like his rapport with Tegan. I think he loves the fact that Tegan's Australian, realises that Tegan's Australian, and loves the whole character, and they kind of have a good rapport there, and I think that's quite nice. I'll come back to who I think is probably one of the better guest cast members in a minute. We then have two more. We've got Gareth Milne, who plays George Cranley, who's known as the Unknown in the first episode, but actually is named in the second episode. That's played quite well, considering this guy's supposed to be disfigured and had mental issues with him after being attacked in the Amazon with its exploring. It's interesting how they've cast the stuntman, Gareth Milne, to be this role, to make it a bit easier overall with the whole situation. It works. I think it does work. I think you couldn't really get another actor to come in and do some of the stunt work here. It does kind of work to have that kind of consistency all the way through. I'm not sure at one point where the Harlequin's there, whether that is actually Gareth Milne playing the Harlequin when George takes the costume of the Doctor's Harlequin costume and then dances with Anne into the main hallway, in the main reception area, and then starts to try and keep her effectively, because obviously they were to be married at one point. I'm not sure whether that is George Milne or whether that's Peter Davison just having a bit of fun in the costume. I have a funny feeling it might be Peter Davison. The reason I think that is, if you look at the scene when he's starting to lean down to reach Anne, pick up Anne at the end of the first episode, there's a break in the costume. There's kind of like a split in the costume with the seam where it comes together at the front, and you can see through. and it's not the jumper that George is wearing. It happens to be, looks like it's the Criticking jumper that the Fifth Doctor wears. So either George has worn the whole of the Doctor's costume over the Harlequin stuff, under the Harlequin stuff, or it's Peter Davison doing that role and not Gareth Milne. It's interesting, and I wonder if you guys will actually be able to figure out that. That's a nice little conspiracy. Was it Peter Davison doing that scene and not Gareth Milne? That'd be interesting to see if that was actually true. Might be a question I have to ask at some point, if I ever meet the man. We've then got the Tony played by Ahmed Kali. He's got a plate in his lip to make him more of a kind of Amazonian South American man. They've obviously got somebody who's of that kind of skin tone and colour to do it. He plays the role decent enough. It works well. But when he's talking, it's obvious it's dubbed. It's obvious it's dubbed on the outside scene, definitely, because how can you speak with that? You know, it's obviously there's a bit more to it, and that's a kind of production quirk that I've noticed in this one. It sounds like it's dubbed. His lines are dubbed here because his mouth movements don't kind of match 100% to what he's actually saying. So it's interesting how that all works. Overall, it's a decent acted role. You've then got Michael Cochrane playing Lord Cranley. Now, Michael Cochrane has become more known as he's got older as a more gruff and pompous upper-class man in some of his roles. His most famous, of course, is Simmerson in Sharp. But with both the roles he plays in Doctor Who's TV series, and he does make appearance back in Doctor Who's Big Finish, where he plays an upper-class pompous idiot again. But in these two, he plays a kind of more nuanced upper-class man. And I quite like the way the character's portrayed here, and it shows a different range to Michael Cochrane from the roles he got himself pigeonholed into later on. And I like the way he comes across here as kind of very gentle man who... upper class man. He's you know, and he's very affable, very friendly. I do like the way he's portrayed, and I do like the character Cranley for that. And I think Michael Cochrane is one of the best standout guest casts of this story. Is that acting that he does in that one? Acting, of course, they're all acting, but that the way the role is portrayed, I think, is probably the best of the characters. Elements of the story, I tell you one thing, the BBC knows how to do period drama. The scenes inside in the studio for the house are fantastic. You really think it's the period, it's really well lit, the way it's done, the production values are quite well. Ron Jones has done a good job on this one, on the outside stuff and the inside stuff. I love the little tidbit fact that the scene where you see, the wide shot you see of when the Doctor's playing cricket, Peter Davison bowling to that extra at the wicket, that was real. That was first shot real, according to what Peter Davison has said in the interviews, and I think that's really quite cool that he managed it. You can see the rest he wasn't quite as good because there's a lot of edit cuts, but that long shot is actually quite impressive and actually works, and it's a great little shot to get, and it's really good serendipity in that respect. I love the way it's all filmed. I think it's lovely. Get your head down, get going, and enjoying the atmosphere and everything. The locations they used are really evocative of the time. The filming's quite well. Ron Jones does a good job with the script. Terence Dudley does a kind of standard script. It's like he's come in and just said, right, okay, we want a Doctor Who story, and we want a Doctor Who story based on a historical setting. The only real alien elements are going to be the Doctor and his companions. Run with it. And he does, and it works, and it's a great little two-parter. I don't think it could do any more than 2 parts. I think it really works within the 2-part. If you did this as an actual modern episode, it would work, because it's obviously 50 minutes. It would work as a modern episode, and I think it would actually stand up quite well with some of the stuff you get in the Doctor Who era, especially the latter new series, the Peter Capaldi kind of Jodie Whittaker era. It would work quite well in there as a story on its own right, and it really has that theme of a more modern feeling to Doctor Who, seeing it now, but with kind of an early 80s BBC type feel to it, which is really, really nice. Music-wise, Roger Lim, it's interesting. Roger Lim's very good at his atmospheric synths and does a lot of synths. He does that a lot in Arc Infinity and obviously in Caves of Androzani. I like the way his atmospheric music works. There isn't really any, it's more atmospheric, there's no leitmotifs or regular musical cues that come through. He is really just punctuating the story, but I like the fact that he's put a kind of modern element, he's kind of put an element that's more reflective of the time, with a kind of sound of a grand piano kind of idea, with some of the highlights of the suspicions when you're going round the house. in story, and I do like the way it's portrayed there. I think it works quite well, and I think the music complements this story quite well in an early 80s way. Overall, I do like this story. I think it's quite well paced. I think it's got quite a good setup to it. I do like the story overall. It's certainly one I'll go and watch. It not quite got the heights of The Visitation for me, so I can't give it a 4 TARDIS out of 5, but I will give it a high 3.5 TARDISes out of 5. Okay, let's see how that story stacks up with the rest of the Peter Davison era so far, and also how that stacks up with the rest of the stories for the TV series I've reviewed so far as well. So the Peter Davison era has 6 stories reviewed. The Five Doctors sits in alongside Black Orchid with 3.5 TARDIS out of 5. Arc of Infinity is the worst story so far of the Peter Davison era with 3 TARDIS out of 5. And at the top is the Case of Androzani with 4.5 TARDIS out of 5. Resurrection of the Daleks and The Visitation both have 4 TARDIS out of 5. Overall, there are worse stories. Time Lash and Sleep No More, 2.5 TARDIS out of 5, as always. And along with Case of Androzani at 4.5 TARDIS out of 5, we have The Happiness Patrol, Inferno, The Day of the Doctor, The Tomb of the Cybermen, and Dalek. That's it from me. Thank you guys for watching this Doctor Who review. Tell me what you think of Black Orchid. Leave a comment down below. Do you like it? Leave a comment down below. Do you not like it? Leave a comment down below. And you can go and help support the channel a lot more by going to the Patreon at patreon.com/Deanstructor. For as little as £1 or $1 a month, you can help support the channel. Up until the end of February, you can see extended Kidstructor reaction to Frosty the Snowman. That's available to every patron from level 1 up to level 3. Patreon.com/Deanstructor. If you like this channel, please support it. Go to the Facebook, go to the Twitter, go to the Instagram, go to the Patreon, as I've mentioned already. But you can also hit that subscribe button and notifications bell so you know when a new video comes out. And like this video if you like it, and share it with the hashtag TeamStructor. Mixed it all up there. I am back on Sunday with the 6 Facts at 4 PM GMT, which is the general rule of when a new video comes out, Sunday 4 PM GMT. But until then, thanks guys for watching as always. And do you know what? I will see you later.